Welcome back to Jack and Rex Tales. The first thing Jack Thompson did every morning was check if Rex was still breathing. Not because Rex was sick, not because there was any real reason to worry, but because in the last 3 years, Rex was the only living thing Jack was responsible for. And responsibility, for a man like Jack, was the last rope he was still holding. He would lie still in the gray early light, listening, and then he would hear it, the slow, steady rhythm of the dog breathing on the floor beside him, and something in his chest would loosen just enough to let the morning in. That was how Jack Thompson started every day. That was what kept him starting them at all. It was a January morning in Hays, Kansas, when everything changed. Jack had been sleeping in the back of a borrowed truck for 11 days. The temperature had dropped to 9 degrees overnight. He had 1 blanket, half a bag of dog food, and $14 in his jacket pocket. Rex was curled against his side, warm and heavy, his breath making small clouds in the frozen air. Jack was 50 years old. He had once led 12 men through a valley in eastern Afghanistan at 2 in the morning with nothing but night vision and instinct. He had once made a decision in 4 seconds that saved 8 lives. He had medals he kept in a shoebox because he didn't know what else to do with them. Now, he was trying to figure out if $14 was enough for one more night. He lay there in the dark of that truck bed, Rex pressed against him, staring up at the black underside of the camper shell above him. And he thought, not dramatically, not with anguish, but with the quiet, exhausted clarity of a man who has been tired for a very long time. I don't know how much longer I can do this. Rex shifted beside him, pushed his nose under Jack's arm, worked his way in until his head was resting on Jack's chest. Jack put his hand on the dog's back, felt the breathing, steady and slow and completely certain. He closed his eyes. Okay, he thought. One more day. That was all Rex ever had to do. Just breathe. Just stay. Just remind Jack that something in this world still needed him to be present. It was enough. It was always just enough. The call came at 9 that morning. Jack was sitting in the diner on Main Street. The kind of place with coffee so hot it came in mugs that burned your fingers, and pie rotating slowly in a glass case by the register. He'd ordered the cheapest thing on the menu and was making it last. Rex was tied to the post outside, visible through the window. Jack kept one eye on him the way he always did in public. Old habit, old instinct. His phone rang. Unknown number with a Hays area code. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Thompson, the man's voice, measured, professional. I'm an attorney here in Hays. I've been trying to reach you for some time. A pause. I have something that belongs to you. Jack looked out the window at Rex. Rex was sitting perfectly still at the post, watching the door, waiting. I think you have the wrong man, Jack said. Jack Allen Thompson, retired Navy SEAL. Serial number. All right. Jack set down his coffee. What is this about? I think, Gerald Marsh said carefully, that it would be better if we spoke in person. The law office was warm and smelled like old paper and wood polish. Gerald Marsh was in his 70s, white-haired, with the kind of face that had seen enough of life to approach all of it with gentleness. He looked at Jack across the conference table. He looked at Rex sitting beside Jack's chair. He said nothing about the dog. He opened a folder and removed a photograph. He slid it across the table. Jack picked it up. An older man, mid-70s, wide, sun-worn face, kind eyes that held something behind them, not sadness exactly, but the specific gravity of a man who understood what it meant to be alive because he had once come very close to not being. He was standing in front of a wheat field, smiling. Something moved in Jack's memory, far away, like a shape seen through smoke. His name was Harold Briggs, Gerald said. "He passed away 11 weeks ago." He paused. "He left you his farm, Mr. Thompson. All of it. 1,100 acres, the farmhouse, the equipment, the water rights. Everything." Jack set the photograph down very slowly. "I don't know this man." Gerald reached into the folder and removed a letter. Handwritten. Several pages. The script careful and slightly unsteady. A man writing through pain, taking his time, making sure every word was right. He slid it across the table. Jack picked it up, and the smoke of 20 years began to clear. "Dear Mr. Thompson, you won't remember me. That's all right. I've had 20 years to make peace with that. It was April, a village outside Ramadi. I was a civilian contractor, water infrastructure. I had no business being anywhere near that convoy, but I was. And when the first vehicle was hit, I didn't know which way to run. I was wounded in the shoulder. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. The smoke was everywhere, and I remember thinking very clearly, this is where it ends. And then your hand closed around my arm. You didn't say anything. You didn't ask my name. You just pulled. Hard. The way a man pulls when there is no time for anything except the pulling. And you got me into that vehicle. 30 seconds. Maybe less. I watched your face for one moment before the doors closed. You were already looking somewhere else. Already moving to the next thing. I was already behind you. I went home, Mr. Thompson. I married Catherine. I raised my daughter Emma. I built that farm from 40 acres to 1,100. I watched my granddaughter take her first steps in the East Field last spring. Every single one of those moments exists because you reached back without thinking. I have thought about you every day for 20 years. I hired people to find you. It took a long time. What I found when they finally located you broke my heart in a way I wasn't prepared for. You gave me everything, Jack, and I am giving it back the only way I know how. The farm needs work, more than it should. I got sick before I could finish what needed doing. But I have to believe, that a man who ran towards gunfire for strangers has enough in him to face a broken barn and some unpaid taxes. Stay, Jack. Please stay. Build something. Rest. Let the land be what it was always meant to be for a man who has given enough. You saved my life and forgot about it. I remembered for both of us. Harold Briggs. Jack read the letter once. Then he sat completely still for a long moment, the pages held carefully in both hands. And it came back to him. Not fully, not the man's face, not his name, but the feeling of it. The weight of a body against his arm, the heat of the smoke, the sound of the vehicle door, the way he'd moved on without stopping, because stopping was a luxury that moment didn't offer. He remembered the feeling of pulling someone towards safety. He had not known in that moment that he was pulling toward this room, toward this table, toward a letter written by a dying man who wanted more than anything to say thank you to someone who had no idea he was owed it. Rex made a low sound beside him, not quite a whimper, something quieter than that. He pressed his head against Jack's knee. Jack put one hand on the dog's head. He didn't trust himself to speak. Gerald Marsh said nothing. He was a man who understood when silence was the only appropriate thing. The farm was 11 miles outside of town. Jack drove out that same afternoon, Rex riding with his head out the window, despite the cold, ears streaming back, nose reading everything the Kansas air had to tell him. When the property came into view, Jack slowed the truck and stopped on the road. The farmhouse needed paint. The porch leaned. The barn roof had a collapsed section, the broken boards hanging open to the sky. The fields were unworked and hard with winter. The irrigation lines were cracked and pulled up in places, running nowhere. It looked like a place that had given up. Jack got out of the truck. The wind was cold and direct, the way Kansas wind always is. No apology, no detour, straight through you. He stood at the fence line and looked at the broken farm and felt something he hadn't expected. Recognition. He walked the property until the lights started going. Rex ran ahead of him, nose down, covering ground in long, easy loops, circling back regularly to check on Jack before ranging out again. There was something joyful in the dog's movement, something unleashed, like Rex had been waiting for open ground. Jack watched him run. He stood at the edge of the east field as the sun dropped low and red behind the tree line, Rex a dark shape moving against the gold and brown of the dormant land, and he thought about Harold Briggs standing in this same spot, building something from nothing, remembering every day. He thought about 30 seconds. He thought about how a moment can weigh nothing and mean everything. He slept in the farmhouse that night on an old cot. The heat worked until 3, then stopped. He pulled his jacket over himself, and Rex pressed against his back, and they slept that way until gray light came through the window. The second week was when it almost ended. Jack had been keeping a list of everything that needed fixing. The list had grown to 4 pages. The cost estimates he'd roughed out were so far beyond anything he had access to that looking at the numbers felt like a bad joke. A section of the east fence had collapsed. The well pump was failing. The tractor needed parts that had to be ordered from 2 states away. He sat at the old kitchen table on a Tuesday night with Harold's letter in front of him and a cold cup of coffee in his hand, and he made a decision. He was going to walk away. It was too much. He wasn't a farmer. He had no money, no experience, no right to think he could bring this place back. Harold had made a beautiful mistake, and the kindest thing Jack could do was acknowledge it and go. He stood up, put his jacket on, picked up his backpack, and set it by the door. Then he reached down for Rex's leash. Rex was lying by the wood stove. He looked up at Jack. He did not get up. "Rex," Jack's voice was quiet. "Come on." Rex held his eyes, didn't move, just looked at him with that deep, dark, completely steady gaze, the look that said, without any possible misunderstanding, "I know what you're doing, and I'm not going to help you do it." Jack crouched down in front of him. "I can't fix this place, buddy." His voice dropped lower. "I can't fix anything." Rex lifted his head and pushed it slowly forward until his forehead was resting against Jack's forehead. They stayed like that. The wood stove ticked quietly. Outside, the Kansas wind moved across the frozen fields. Inside, a man and his dog held still together in the way that only 2 creatures who have been through the dark can hold still together, completely and without reservation. Jack's eyes closed. Something let go. He sat all the way down on the floor. Rex immediately moved into him, pressing his full, warm weight against Jack's side, chin resting on Jack's knee, exhaling slowly. Jack put his arm around him. He sat there on that cold farmhouse floor for a long time. He did not leave. A neighbor named Dale Hutchins showed up the following Monday in a muddy truck with a thermos and no explanation beyond, "Heard someone was working the Briggs place." He was 63, quiet, and knew farming the way Jack knew fieldcraft, in the hands, in the instincts, in the early morning decisions nobody ever sees. They worked well together, without needing to talk much. Word moved through haze the way it moves through small towns, quietly and completely. A mechanic came for the equipment. 2 women from the church left food without making anything of it. A teenager showed up on weekends and learned things. Jack didn't know how to accept help, but he learned. The barn roof was repaired in March, the fields planted in May. The first morning, Jack walked the east field after planting and felt the soil soft and worked beneath his boots, felt the particular silence of land that has been tended and is now waiting. He stopped walking and just stood there. Rex ran the field beside him, long, joyful loops, gray muzzle low to the new earth, tail moving. Jack watched him and felt something he hadn't felt in so long he'd almost forgotten the word for it. Peace. Not the absence of pain, not the end of memory, but peace, the quiet kind that comes when a man finally has somewhere to stand. 2 summers later, the wheat stood gold and heavy to the horizon. The farmhouse had fresh paint. The barn was straight and solid. The porch had been rebuilt true and level with 2 chairs on it. Jack sat in one every evening. Rex sat beside him. Harold Briggs's letter hung framed in the kitchen, next to the window that looked out over the east field. Jack read it sometimes on quiet mornings. He thought about 30 seconds. He thought about how a moment can leave one man's memory completely and live in another man's heart for 20 years. He thought about how Harold Briggs had died knowing he'd given something back, and how that knowledge must have felt in those final weeks. He hoped Harold had died at peace. He looked at Rex beside him on the porch, gray-muzzled, warm in the evening sun, breathing slow and easy, deeply and completely at home. "We made it, buddy," Jack said softly. Rex opened one eye, thumped his tail twice against the porch boards, closed his eye again. The sun moved lower. The wheat moved in the evening wind. A barn swallow cut fast and low across the field and disappeared into the tree line. Jack Thompson sat on his porch on his farm in Kansas and let the evening come. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he did not brace against it. You never know which moment of your life will matter forever. You never know whose heart is carrying something you said, something you did, some small act of courage or kindness that you've long since forgotten, but that changed everything for them. Harold Briggs remembered for 20 years what Jack forgot in 30 seconds, and in the end, that memory saved them both. If you are tired tonight, if the road has been long and the doors have been closed and you are wondering whether any of it means anything, let Jack's story remind you that it does. That goodness travels forward in ways we cannot see. That the kindness you offer today, without expectation, without memory, may come back to you in the form of a second chance you didn't know you were waiting for. Keep going. Keep reaching back. Keep showing up, because somewhere ahead of you, past the hardest year, past the closed doors, past the cold nights, there is a field with your name on it. And beside you, steady and certain and completely faithful, is the one soul who always knew you'd find it. If this story reached something in you, subscribe to Jack and Rex Tales. Every story on this channel is a reminder that courage is real, loyalty is real, and second chances are real. We'll see you in the next one.